Good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. This topic today is a very popular one, and it is tactics to sell around the cost of home care. So let me do a little bit of housekeeping first. I believe I've welcomed you. So the next order of business is to say that I am recording this webinar because we generally do not send out the PowerPoint. However, we do post these webinars after we do them on our CoreCubed website on our events page. So that is corecubed.com/events if you want to go there directly. And you may share it with anyone you want to. And hopefully you all will be spreading the word about the information that we present today and how to better do home care. So you have everyone on mute. That's the other thing I need to tell you, that I have everyone on mute. And if you have questions, on the right-hand side of your screen in the bottom, you should see a question box. And please type in your question there, and we will get to those questions at the end of the webinar today. And if for some reason we don't have time to get to those questions, then we will answer them individually. And we also have contact information at the end of this webinar, so if you want to contact us either by phone, by email, however you wish to communicate with us, we are most open to contact. So we look forward to hearing from you. My name is Marilee Orsini, and I have been in aging care for a very long time. And I've also been in marketing and public relations for home care for a very long time. So I've pretty much now got, I believe I'm in my 34th or 35th year, I believe this year is, of working in the aging care industry, and really enjoy it. And I am passionate about making a difference in home care and how we operate our home care in America for the future to meet the needs. So I am really excited to be here today, but the more exciting thing is the two people that I have joining me today. And these are my managing directors for CoreCubed. Marissa Snook is has been here the longest, and she also runs our very popular MOST program, which is a marketing program specifically for the home care industry. So, Marissa, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
And I also have Amy Selle, and Amy has been with us a couple of years now, and prior to joining CoreCubed, she actually worked for one of our clients and was a client of ours. So we had such a good time working with her, and we were so impressed with how she used our material that we coaxed her into joining CoreCubed, which she has done. So Amy, welcome, and thank you for bringing your wealth of knowledge not only to CoreCubed but to our webinar today.
Thank you.
The objectives for today, we are going to talk a little bit about the psychology behind the purchase process. Not a whole lot, because we do have whole separate webinars and in-person seminars about the psychology and the buying process. What we're really going to talk about today is how do you handle those questions about cost effectively, and how do you then get that in-home assessment, which is what everybody does want to get. And then we will end with how marketing, your strategic marketing, and the quality of your marketing material can help you prove that you are the best choice for that person who is seeking care. Now, this is something that once you get the attention of the person who is seeking care, so you've done something right to get their attention in the first place, and they're calling you, because we do know that 95% of people who are searching online or searching or researching for home care will actually pick up the phone and call. And generally, the first question that they ask is, what's it going to cost me for you to care for my mother or my father, my loved one? And we want to know, and we're going to explore today, why is it that what does it cost? Why is that the first question that someone seeking home care often asks? And what we surmise is, and this is based on, again, years and years of experience, and not only with my own agency, but with my staff and me working with other home care agencies, the caller is really searching in a complex system of care, and they're really looking for a solution to care. Home care is just one of those options. There are other options that might be more appropriate or as appropriate as home care, but that caller probably does not really understand all of the care options and all of the decision-making factors, and so costs may be the only thing that they know enough to ask about, and that is where they start. So
yeah, I think this is a great point, that whenever we're purchasing goods or services, cost is a top question that we have. It's just something that we're trained to do, and it's something that impacts our own budget, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other questions that we have to lead them toward or answer for them.
very good.
They could be wondering, am I wasting my time? Is this even something that I can afford before I get into discussing this with anybody? Or maybe they're the 10th home care agency that they've called today and they just want to cut to the chase. So I think there's a couple of different reasons that could be going on in their minds.
And the key here is your attention. The person who answers that phone, who has that person on the phone, that is the key here to what we're talking about in Selling Around Cost, and what we're going to really focus on today is giving that person who has gotten you on the phone your attention 100%. So we're going to call that the intake call. That means you've gotten the call, you are at your desk or you're somewhere where you really need to then get rid of everything else in your mind, no matter what's going on, everything else of your mind, and focus on this person. Because cost is only one of those factors when they're selecting home care, and it is only one variable in that decision-making process. But again, it's really might be the only thing they know or where they have as a starting point. And so what we're going to talk about today is how do you sell around the cost, because what you really want to do is educate your inquirers and educate your referral sources. So how do we do that? Well, there's a process. And the first process is the psychological needs of the caller. Now, this woman looks very distressed.
Yes. Poor lady.
She is not in a happy spot, not in a good place. And so this is probably a good visual of what the person who's trying to find care for their loved one is feeling at the moment, because they really are probably experiencing anxiety, guilt, even shame maybe, because they're having to go outside of their family for help. So
yeah, maybe some frustration, some confusion.
So not a happy spot. And what this person is looking for is someone to listen to them and to help them. They have a problem, and that problem is their mother, their father, their sister, their brother, their husband, whatever, whoever it is that needs that care, and they know they need some help. And so this call, although they're asking what's it going to cost you to help me out of this mess, what they're really trying to do is find someone to really listen to them. So what are they searching for? They are oftentimes, they're searching to solve their problem, whatever that problem is, but they generally, when this person calls, doesn't know any of the options available. They've heard about home care. They've read a little bit about it. They've seen it online, whatever. Someone talked to them about it. They might have had a neighbor that had home care. But they don't know that it's the right decision, but they are being driven by that desire to see if it's the right decision, and cost is one of those options. But the things that you have to think about when you're talking with them is it the right option for them? And can you actually provide the care, or is this something that you need to refer out to someone else? So that caller's looking for a solution to their problem, and it may or may not be your agency and the care that you provide. So let's dig a little deeper into what really matters to this client who's got you on the phone. Atul Gawande talks about the 3 plagues of nursing home care, and I've translated this into aging care because I do think it fits well. Boredom, loneliness, and helplessness. Those are the 3 things that you want to avoid by having some type of a care option. And then there's some other negatives of frailty that might also be present in the person who needs care, and that might be isolation or desolation even, and withdrawal. So that person who is reaching out to you for care is looking for a solution to a problem, but what they really want to know is that they're going to make the best decision for their loved one. And it's not necessarily the cheapest decision.
Yeah, I think happiness is something that sort of underlies everything. I was talking to a home care client recently, and they said, out of everything that families are looking for, the bottom line is that they want their loved one to be happy. Maybe the choices that they make aren't the complete safest option, but if that's the option that is really going to make them happy and it's relatively, a good option for them, that's what they're going to choose.
Right. And I think what I would add to that is that when they first call your agency, the way that you relate to them, the way that you listen and respond to them sets the example for how they expect the rest of your agency staff to listen and respond so that happiness can be achieved.
I'm going to just switch a little bit and mention also if you have a referral source who is calling you and they start with that question, the same process will be followed that we're going to talk about in a minute. But instead of the happiness factor and the alleviation of the 3 plagues of care, the boredom and loneliness and helplessness, referral sources are generally, they want to make a good referral because by their making an accurate referral to you, then that means they will refer to you in the future. So what's important to them for those referral sources or to the families? They want to make sure that their loved one is in a safe environment. They want to try to maintain that independence for as long as possible and in as many ways as possible. They also are anticipating that if they had home care, there would be some engaging and inspiring activities that it would involve the person who needs care. And then that happiness factor comes in here too, the connection to others, so that there are other people involved in the care that can extend that factor of feeling safe and comfortable and happy at home. So how do you sell around the cost? Well, this is the key here, and this is very hard to do. Marissa, you have been involved, and we've at Corcubed have been involved over the years in a lot of mystery shopping calls. And what happens generally when we mystery shop an agency?
Most times when we call as a potential client, the agency goes immediately into a long discussion of what their services are, how long they've been in business, how great they are, instead of asking about the caller's needs, about the caller's loved one, why they're even calling in the first place.
And this goes into training your staff and yourself to get really good at asking behavioral questions. Now, in a couple of slides from here, I'm going to have some lists of things, but before we get to those lists of things, then you have to really get your head in that mindset, because you not only have to ask those good behavior questions, you really have to listen. I came across a term recently called reflective listening. I used to call it active listening, but after reading about reflective listening, I think that's far more appropriate for what we are talking about here. And that is truly, you are listening, you're asking them behavioral questions, and we'll give you some examples of those in a minute, but you really do have to make yourself listen and not talk. And you have to even be comfortable with some silence. And
Yeah.
let them talk.
Yeah, and I think what reflective listening does, it does something for the person calling, and it also does something for the person answering the phone at your agency. For the person who's calling, it starts to form that relationship and bond with the customer. It starts to satisfy their need for someone to respond to them and hear their story. And for you as the person at the agency answering the phone, it starts to better solidify in your mind whether or not this person might be a good match for your agency. And it starts leading into making an assessment about what types of services that they might need. It's definitely the best way to start, because it helps you to start to form that relationship with the person that you're talking to.
If you know you're not a good listener, I think if you find yourself formulating an answer or another question before the caller has even finished speaking, step back, refocus, take notes if you have to. That could help you focus. But it is hard to do well.
Well, and 2 tips to this are, number 1, the specific person they're calling about. So when someone's calling, if it's their great aunt, write down great aunt. You know, if they're comfortable sharing the name, you can say Great Aunt Millie. So, I mean, get into who you're talking about specifically, not generically, and then that reflective listening component is reflect back to them what you think you heard. So, and not in every sense, of course, but I mean, what you're trying to do is get yourself on the level with the person who is got that problem and trying to empathize with them and really get into how are we going to solve the problem. So, and again, before you mention price, now they may have asked about price, but before you mention price, you really want to know what they're looking for. What's the situation? And I'll go into some questions in a minute, because the thing is, if they're just price shopping and they're just looking for the lowest cost, then no matter what you say or do, you're not going to be a good fit. So if they keep coming back and say, I don't want to talk about this, I just want to know what it costs, then I would, skip the misery of trying to go through this process. If they're angry or agitated, then go ahead and talk price. But try to get their contact information, because oftentimes if someone is really looking just for price, it means they don't understand the bigger picture. They don't understand what all of the complexity is in care, and they don't understand home care. I mean, I used to laugh with some of the inquiries I got when I had my home care agency, because I think they thought when they called that I had a whole lineup of caregivers all lined up across the wall. And when they called, I went, oh, let's pick which one we want to go to this client, which, as we all know, is not the case at all. So, the person calling, you really want them to be comfortable with you, and if they continue to insist on price, then go ahead and do that. But better, if you can, say, before I can price this for you, I really need to find out more about your great Aunt Millie's needs. And after I find out that, then I can give you a better estimate of a range of costs. And you might at the end be able to give them an estimate of a range of costs, but if you've gotten an in-home assessment, you might be able also to wait until you get to the in-home assessment and talk about costs at that time, because we all know once you get the in-home assessment, your possibilities of closing that deal, of getting that client, are greater, much greater than if you don't get that in-home assessment. The other thing is, and you should be aware of other options for payment, and there are some, so you should be aware of the options for payment in your community, and there would be other things besides some veterans benefits and long-term care insurance. There might be reverse mortgages, there might be family pooling of resources, but also to let them know there sometimes is help for that payment. So let's talk about the behavioral approach. Amy, do you want to talk about this?
Sure, yes. Yeah, actually, and I've been in this role as a marketing person, marketing and sales person for an aging care company. And I think one of the best things to do when you answer the phone and you've got that initial introduction that you've made is to just ask the client, what's going on that made you call me today, and give them that opening to tell their story to you. You know, they've got a story, and as we've talked about so far today, a lot of times there's a lot of emotions swirling around that story. Just opening the door for them to kind of go through what's been going on with their family member and how that makes them feel brings up a lot of questions that you might have been asking later on, but it does it in a way that allows them to kind of vent a little, get things off their chest, and ask you for help organizing that information. And that's where the reflective listening comes back in, when you repeat back to them, so this is what I heard you saying today, and these are the most important issues that you want to see taken care of for your loved one. Then you get a chance to help them organize that information and say yes or no or correct what you've reflected back to them. And then you can start talking about the situation and start organizing in your mind what you might want to get more information about from them and how your services are going to fit or not fit with what their situation entails. And then this last point I think is really important, just to reassure them after you've heard their story and you've kind of reflected back, let them know, we can help you figure this out. So, and here's how, I think we can do that. And even if you're referring them out to another service because maybe, they can't afford your services, I think giving them that reassurance at the end positions your agency as an agency that cares about people and that provides the quality that they're looking for. Hello?
Hello? I lost sound. I don't know if everyone else lost sound as well.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm expanding on this. So, talking.
Yeah, I lost my audio too. That's so strange.
Well, I'm going to go back to talking about who the care is for, because this list that we have here is a list that that you really do need to go through when you are in your behavioral questions. You don't ever want to make this sound like you are just going down a checklist. This needs to be conversational, because what you're really trying to find out is the care for one person or two people? What happened that make that care need appear? Was there someone there who provided care before? Was it a family member? Was it another agency? If something bad happened, to stop that, what happened? And what's different now today than yesterday when you didn't make the call? So the other thing is location. Can you actually get to where that client lives? And are there any impediments to getting in there? So you're really trying to find out, how easy is it going to be to provide care here? Do you have the staff to provide care there? And is that care really going to be for one person or two? Also, pets in the home. Do they have a vicious dog in the home? Do they have a pet snake? I mean, there's all kinds of weird things that can prevent a good care experience. And if you are armed with those answers to those questions ahead of time, then that will help you in determining if this is the right type of client for you and if it's something you can do. The other thing is there a responsible person? So if this is an elderly person who lives alone and there's no one else responsible for them, that adds another level of responsibility to the home care agency if you accept that client. And then the other thing is, are there any special needs? Are they on oxygen? Are they using wheelchairs or walkers? Are they incontinent? And then some questions about their cognitive functioning. Do they know what day it is? Do they recognize the people around her? Are they having any issues? I mean, oftentimes someone will say, well, my great Aunt Millie's a little forgetful. And you get to the in-home assessment, and great Aunt Millie thinks she's in Marrakesh or someplace. And so it's a whole totally different situation than what you had anticipated. But again, you're doing behavioral questions, but you really are trying to find out. And some of the pricing questions you need to ask, and again, you're also seeing, can they afford to pay for your care? You can ask about Medicaid. And have they received any kind of home care before? So trying to determine what is the best match here for you and your agency. So you basically are going to want to know, are you going to be caring for one person or two people? If it's a husband and wife situation, then oftentimes you end up with two clients, not one client, and that makes a difference on how you price it. Is this really a non-skilled or a non-medical case and client situation, or is there a medical need there, and you might need to partner with another agency or have an assessment done by a medical, someone, a nurse or someone with a medical background. The other thing, and let me just say one thing, Amy, and then I'll let you come in.
Sure.
This lifting and toileting, that was the one trigger that makes a difference of whether or not someone can actually live at home with help reasonably, is if they can get up and down to the bathroom. If they cannot get up and down to the bathroom, that means they pretty much are going to need somebody there 24/7, because they're going to have to get up and go to the bathroom during the night.
I was going to say that the key is that you should have a list of questions like this. And when you do your tell me about why you called today, you can have that list in front of you and be filling in those things that you hear, and then you know what other questions, the ones that you didn't hear answers to, that you want to work into the conversation or ask when you're done in a conversational way. I think a lot of sales is, we kind of, as humans, we're creatures of habit. We want to have a routine. We want to know how every call is going to go. And that's a big point here, that every call is going to be different because every person and every caller is different. And you want to let them tell their story organically, but make sure you're gathering that information and checking it against the information you need and getting the rest of the information that you need.
When I had my business, we used an inquiry intake form, and some people use this now. A lot of the software scheduling programs also have that intake form. And then sometimes that intake form moves into a request for service if they're comfortable. If they get comfortable enough with you and that rapport is established, then that can move into request for service. But I'll just mention we do sell both of those on our Market Home Care website. So if anyone is interested in having that list and not having to create that list themselves, we do have that. So let's move into what you're really doing here is establishing a rapport, establishing a connection with the caller. So your questioning, but most importantly, your listening shows that you do care for that person who is searching for a solution to their problem. And now in your head, you're determining if this is something that you can staff and that it suits your agency to be able to provide those services long term. So, and I think those are important things. If you make a sale to someone but you can't staff it, or it's a level of care beyond which you can provide, or it's in a geographic area that you literally cannot get to, or it's at a time that you cannot staff, then you need to be realistic about that. Now, it's possible that they could change the time they want service or something, but some of those other things are not changeable. So in establishing that rapport and connection, you're also trying to determine if it is truly something that you would like to do. So let's talk some more about overcoming price objections. And let me first say, you can only overcome the price objection if you provide a quality service. So that goes without saying, and we're not going to go into what's a quality service, except for some of these things which do provide quality, and because it means you're paying attention to the business and you're paying attention to those people who work for you. And the first one is that employing of the care staff. Now, we may have some registries on board here, and if we do have registries, then obviously this isn't going to pertain to you. But if you are a full employment model agency, that's a good selling point. If you're not, then you do need to at some point let that caller, you have to have that discussion about who employs the caregiver. But if you do employ your care staff, that does allow an additional level of safety and security to either the family member who's calling or to the referral source, because you as the employer are accepting some responsibilities for that person in the home, which does not happen if you are not employing your care staff. The other thing is trained caregivers and matching those caregivers with what that person needs. So this is really important to the person seeking freedom from boredom and loneliness and helplessness, because being trained on how to actually provide care in the home, allow some independence for the client, bring activities into the home, perhaps special training on how to deal with someone who has Alzheimer's or dementia. I mean, there's very important factors about why are you the best quality service and why are you the best decision. And obviously you want to match those with what the person who's inquiring has inquired about. You want to match it to their situation specifically. The other thing are the long-term liability and risks to the elderly and their family when you have someone who's actually employed by the agency. If it is a registry, you do have some issues with unemployment insurance claims if someone actually gets injured in the home. And as an agency, you do have the opportunity to train your staff and to make certain that they are comfortable in knowing what to do so they can avoid those injuries, avoid the back strains, and help avoid falls for the client. So those are other things that might be mentioned that the caller might not have thought about. The other things that are value added that your agency can bring to the table, and hopefully you do, is that backup care in case of an emergency. I'm always tickled, or not tickled, I guess, amused or about agencies who do not staff cases. You should not have a case if you can't staff it. And you always have to have backup care in case of an emergency, because people simply don't pay for care unless they think you're going to be there. I mean, that sort of getting there is the number one thing that you have to do. So providing backup care can be really important, particularly if the person really needs someone there and there's not a family member or anyone close who could come in and help. The other thing is disaster planning. I mean, having a disaster plan in place so that when there is a natural disaster, that you can assure the family or the inquirer that you are going to service them in some manner. Now, obviously, there'll be a triage for that, but in some manner during a disaster. The other thing is meeting needs in a timely manner and having a care team involved. So this is, the reason for the additional cost is that you might be able to refer that person out for other needs. And there might be other needs that person has that your agency doesn't meet, but you can put together a care team to meet those needs. Very, very important is oversight, that you have someone who is peeking into the situation and double checking that everything is okay with the client and that everything is okay with the employee. So again, really important factors that do increase the cost of care, but also make it very important to the caller. And then having someone on call or even a live person is even better, 24/7, 365. That's the one thing about home care, is it is always an everyday, constant situation. There are no days off, no holidays, no weekends.
There are no holidays in home care.
No vacations. People need care all the time. So, but that is something to think about, because if someone wants to hire you and the care is going to be long term, that is an important thing to think about. The next thing is, if you can get that in-home assessment prior to giving them pricing, that is really the very best scenario. Because again, that ratio of close is so much better if you are physically in the home. So by establishing this rapport with the caller and by listening to them and by reflecting what it is that they are telling you, then that is really a pretty good way to see if you can get in there to get an in-home assessment. And so they should be interested in what you're selling if you've given them the time and the interest. And I will mention that mystery shoppers are only going to want pricing. So I know all the agencies get mystery shopped. I don't know how often, but if someone's just wanting pricing, again, just go ahead and give it to them. Don't make it miserable by wasting your time and theirs if that really is just what they want. Now let's talk a little bit about brand extension and reputation and marketing, because if you are providing a quality service, then everything that you do from the time you answer that phone through how you follow up, through anything you send to them, what your website looks like, all of those things are going to extend your brand, and if they're done correctly, they will give the caller a feeling of this is a quality service. And if you provide a quality service, it is that quality that will help you justify your price.
Yeah, I think about it this way. A lot of times in the text that we have about our home care agencies on our websites and in our brochures, it says that we listen, we respond, we follow up, we have high attention to detail, etc. That's what we write about ourselves in our brand. The way that you fulfill the brand on the other end and deliver on it is by actually doing those things and holding yourself to that higher standard of, doing the harder part of really actively listening and reflecting back to them, and showing that attention to detail in the follow-up after you've talked to them. That takes your brand from being just what is written to what is being practiced and delivered to the person calling.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the psychological value of high-quality marketing materials. We've had a number of clients come back to us and say, we got this client only because of our website. They looked at a number of websites, they saw ours, and they just loved the resources on there, and it was easy to find information, and so they just called us. So important.
You do know quality when you see it, and when you talk to it, when you have that feeling. So I want to mention here the follow-up and the attention to detail, because it is amazing to us in the mystery shopping how often we do not get the follow-up information that someone says they'll send. Now, do they know we're mystery shoppers? I don't know. But I think we do a really good job when we do our mystery shopping, so I don't really think they know that. And the fact that they don't send any information even when they say they're going to is astounding to me. The good agencies will send information immediately and then will continue to follow up. So the follow-up, the other component about the follow-up is, if I've called about my great Aunt Millie, and my great Aunt Millie has broken her hip, and she's coming home from the hospital, and that's what I'm calling about, I don't want to get a packet of information from this home care agency that has a lot of information about Alzheimer's disease or whatever, because I'm not interested in that. I am only interested in taking care of great Aunt Millie who has a broken hip. So when you're sending follow-up information, that the same thing that you've established a rapport with them in this call, follow up with them in that same manner. Make certain that what you send them is specifically relating to what they called about and what their problem was, because that is just another way to make people feel that you're paying attention to detail and that you understand their problem and you're going to be the person to help them try to solve it. The other thing is, if they really want a price list right then, so you can send it to them, but make certain that that price list does have information on it about the services you provide and the prices, and that there's a range of prices, not just a blanket price for one thing. So, and if you have to give them prices over the phone before they hang up, do that, but make certain that you can follow up with them. Because if they don't choose your agency, if you've not gotten that in-home assessment from this call, then you can continue to follow up, because oftentimes if they choose the low-cost provider, they're going to be disappointed, and so you've got another opportunity to sell to them later on down the line when they've had a disaster with their first experience with home care, and you can come in and clean it up and show them what home care is supposed to be like. I just have to say here that one of the funny things I've realized lately is that almost 100% of the people who start home care agencies, and those of you on this call probably can attest to this, almost everyone starts a home care business because they had a bad personal experience with a loved one, which tells me that universally around the country, everybody's having bad experiences. So if you can if you can do a positive experience and provide that positive experience, then you're ahead of most of the other agencies. So quality. Marissa, you're an expert on quality. You want to talk a little bit more about quality, and then Amy, you can talk a little bit more about brand.
Sure.
I touched base a little bit about how that psychological value of having high-quality marketing materials, but having materials that reference their problems as well, that answer the questions that they have, that help educate family members. A lot of times that can bring them to your agency because they start to realize how knowledgeable you are, how helpful you are, and how you are paying attention to what they called you about when you follow up with appropriate materials that help answer or help them deal with the situation that they are currently in.
Yeah, Marissa gave an example earlier about quality where we had a client who had someone call them because of the quality of the content on their site, the way it looked, the resources that were available there. On the flip side of that, we've also had a client come to us because she, was a nurse who owned an agency, knew what she was doing, and she had people come to her and tell her that her site did not look professional, and that made them wary of doing business with her, and she wanted to improve that. And she was somebody who, did have her ducks in a row and knew what she was doing, but was not able to convey that quality through her materials that she was presenting to people. So it is very important. People make snap judgments about your digital materials and your print materials, so you want to have them in shape. And you also want to have a good understanding and detail of what your brand is. And basically a brand is your why you do what you do and your story of how you came to do that and why you want to provide that to people. And I think just generally speaking, what we see is that a lot of agencies, they talk about what they do, which, they share a lot in common with many other agencies throughout the country, but they don't talk about why they do it, and they haven't thought internally about why they do it so that they can share that with their caregivers and other employees so that you can all be talking about the same thing. When you stack 5 home care companies up next to each other, the one that stands out is the one that has a story behind why they do what they do. And so that's something to think about as you look at the text that's on your website and in your marketing materials. All of the communications that you make should show quality design, quality and the organization of the text should be grammatically correct, but also should include your brand story and who you are and why you do what you do.
We are at a point now where we can take some questions. And I do have a question about consistency in staffing and how do you talk about that? My example of when the caller called and they think there's all kinds of people lined up against the wall, the caller really doesn't know about what it takes to do home care. So the fact that an agency might have to utilize a team and coverage, I think the best way to get around that is to make certain that you do have a good process in place where you are training people and acclimating people to what the client's needs are. So that means having good information that the aides get so they know what to do when they get there. I mean, how many of you all have ever gone in to care for someone when their caregiver wasn't there? I did that on a holiday weekend, and I was astounded at the level of information that I needed, and it made us handle how we provided our care and communicated a little differently. The client wanted a cup of tea, and that sounds like a simple thing. And so I thought, a cup of tea, I can do that. So I go into the kitchen and I realize there's all different kinds of tea available to me. And there's all different types of things she could drink it out of, from a formal teacup to a coffee mug. And does she take cream or sugar in her tea? There were all kinds of questions that I had that I realized in the make me a cup of tea request did not come through. So we changed how we communicated what was in the home with what we called a care plan book that we left in the home that had specific information in it that covered the client's specific requests. And that way, and we also did care notes in that. So if there was something that some caregiver needed to leave a note for someone else. So that allowed us to staff with more caregivers, and when they came in, they had a pretty good feeling of what was going on. Something as simple as, what did the client eat for meal? So the caregiver could look back and say, well, we had roast beef yesterday, let's don't have roast beef today. So I think it's the processes by which you staff and the information that you give your caregivers, and also the other component would be matching. To make certain that if the client has had some specific requests from someone, that you are matching that specific kind of person in. And then over time, the clients will understand, as they stay with home care for a longer time, that no one can work 7 days a week, and that they're going to have people in. They may have a favorite of those people, but certainly being open and communicating that. And you always want to over-deliver, under-promise, and over-deliver. So I wouldn't promise someone the same person all the time, but just, let them be aware of the different ways that you might have to staff. Then anyone have anything else you want to add to that?
No.
The next question is, what do you advise as a follow-up if the client doesn't choose your agency? I think you should follow up immediately with a note that says, we understand you've chosen another agency, and here's some information specific to, and I would give it specific to what the problem was. If my great Aunt Millie is recuperating from hip replacement, I would send something that had to do specifically with, starting in activities after hip replacement. So you've got something very specific to give to them. And then I would simply follow up. I would follow up a couple of weeks later, so that you are actually, because it usually takes a couple of weeks, I think, for someone to realize they may need to make a change. So I do a first follow-up a couple of weeks later, and then I would continue to follow up monthly after that. If you do a newsletter, it would be a great thing for them to get that newsletter. Whether you're mailing it out or whether you're doing an email newsletter, it would make certain they get that. But I would do some automated responses to them so that they are clearly getting information from you until they've told you to quit sending them information. Amy, Marissa, you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think you said it very well, Marilee.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
I think I would just clarify that, as you're to get emails, I think a lot of salespeople are still not always getting an email, and a lot of people prefer a follow-up via email. And so it's okay if you've got their email to send them a personalized email with some information attached specific to their situation, and just to say, how is it going? Is there any way that I can help?
Well, I have no more questions here. You have been a very attentive audience. We've actually got everybody who started this webinar, and there were many of you, are pretty much still on here. So I'm going to end this with how to contact us, and we are social. So we'd love for you to visit us on any of our social sites because we have a great fun time putting in information that we think will be helpful to our clients and to our potential clients. And if you have any questions about how we can help you either create a brand essence, provide search engine optimization that will make certain that your agency is one of those agencies called, we'd certainly be glad to help you. And we'd love to talk to you. So give us a call or email us, and we look forward to the opportunity of providing you with some of our marketing services. And I thank you, Marissa, and I thank you, Amy, for your time today, and thanks everyone for attending. Let's make it a great day.